shall we do our roundup?
I think so.
Yeah. Do you want to go first again, or?
Yeah, let me go first. So I have not watched a ton. I'm still kind of making my way through the dramas of the Asian countries, mostly South Korea, but with a little bit of Japanese and Chinese. And it's kind of interesting. I was talking to you, just my sample size is still small. I'm not an expert. I don't know that much about some of these countries, maybe more than, a guy on the street, but not as much as someone who really looked into them. But just kind of seeing so far, like the two Chinese ones I've watched have been more nationalistic. There's also a lot of mugging, I noticed. And I don't, again, I've only seen two. It's not that the acting is bad, but the way the stories are written is such that there's a lot of like, hey, my friend so-and-so, he's really this way. And so it's like, it almost even makes me think of silent film acting, where it's like a little, again, I don't think it's the actors. I think it's what the writing kind of calls for.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a lot of like, I keep thinking of John Carpenter's They Live, where it's like, get married, have the babies. Like there's a lot of like that stuff in that. The hairstyles of men can be very boring. Like
right.
That's what I was telling you, like the South Korean and Chinese men's hairstyles are a little boring.
Yeah.
And when you see the Japanese ones, it's like an anime thing. It's also funny, like the Japanese are the sexiest. Korean is like, sometimes they talk about sex. Chinese, like, nope.
That almost feels like there's like the whole one child policy history in China. That almost feels.
Yeah, it's definitely like interesting. But then on the other hand, the Chinese ones have esports in them. And, my complaint about Western romance is that it's so out of touch with anything that's going on. Unless it's like Schitt's Creek or, maybe there's some other like episodic stuff, television stuff, which admittedly the dramas are more episodic television stuff. But like, probably The Big Bang Theory had that kind of stuff in it too, but like in general, but that wasn't like so focused on romance. It's just interesting to see that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I'm still I watched my first BL, which is a boy love. That is literally how they talk about it. It is not, feels uncomfortable. They are notoriously low budget. The one I watched was Taiwanese. It was very sweet, very well-intentioned, very low budget. So, and it again had that kind of quality that I was seeing in the Chinese. It's just kind of silly in places. The storytelling is kind of silly. But at a certain point, it's like the Japanese ones are wacky at times. And you want to say, or I want to think that maybe that comes from the anime. Like the one I'm half watching now is like, one of the characters' nickname is Warrior Chick, and she's a nurse. And just for like a few shots, she will have a shield, a sword, and a crown. And it is, I guess you call it non-diegetic. Like it's like they just appear. She's like, yes. And then they disappear. Like it is not like they have that kind of stuff. Again, it could just be a factor of which ones I've watched. I definitely have to watch more. So that's where I've been. And I want to hear what you think of Castaway on the Moon, which we watched together. But that's all I have to say. I'm going to keep watching dramas. It's your turn to watch a movie for me. Maybe I'll watch something else this week. We'll see.
Well, and theoretically, we're watching the next movie in the Dead series, which I think is Survival of the Dead or something.
Yes, and we're talking about maybe what other related zombie stuff we might watch.
Yeah,
so we'll get to that.
We have a few weeks left in October, so we'll get to some other Night of the Living Dead franchise adjacent things. Well, so I haven't watched that much either. I'm still trying to get into watching more movies again. It's a little tough because, I think I have a significant other who I spend all my time with, and she isn't always as interested in watching movies, which is fine. So I have not as many to talk about, but Castaway on the Moon was a pretty neat movie. I guess
tell me.
It's like a rom-com, I guess, but it's
it's South Korean, but it's a movie length. I'm not sure if it was made as a movie or 2 episodes of a drama or what.
it looks like it's a one full feature, and Wikipedia was not specific, or wherever we looked. Like it doesn't have there's not a lot on this movie.
Yeah.
I liked it a fair bit. I guess there was like moments where I wasn't as necessarily interested in it, and there is some gross stuff in it. Zombie heads exploding, practical effects, fine with that. The bird poop, not as fine with.
I was going to tell you, my friend Lena watched it too, and she was like, I was afraid he was going to eat the bird poop. It was so gross. Everything was so gross. And I was like, I have to tell Theo, because she was also very grossed out by stuff.
I'm glad to know that Lena is on the same page as me. That makes sense. I think it is just very, that some of that stuff is gross, but also like the apartment that the woman lives in is just like trash.
She's a hikikomori, so she's a shut-in and she doesn't leave her room.
Yeah, and it's like, whoa, that's really gross stuff. I like, this is another in the like, Sarah likes, you are very specific. Like you'll watch a fair bit of stuff, but you're very specific in the stuff that you want to watch. And like your favorite rom-coms are all like quirky and like these characters, like they both got like big problems and somehow they help complement each other. And like maybe a romance will start. Who knows? David and Lisa was kind of like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, I liked Castaway on the Moon.
It's an odd duck, but I definitely recommend it to people. So
then there's Half a Loaf of Kung Fu, which is currently on the Criterion Channel. I thought it was leaving at the end of the month, but maybe it isn't. It's
I feel like that changes sometimes. Sometimes I've seen titles disappear, I think, from that.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. There's a Criterion podcast that I listen to, and so it sounds like sometimes maybe there's just mistakes made, or maybe sometimes the contract changes. Who knows? Yeah.
It's all run by people.
All run by people. Half a Loaf of Kung Fu is an early Jackie Chan film. So he comes from the Peking Opera School, I think is what it is.
I think you say it Peking, but
Peking. Oh. And so
isn't Peking and Beijing the same thing?
I think they're the same place.
Because Beijing. Some of the sounds in the Chinese language are a little hard for English speakers to hear and reproduce.
Yeah. And so he originally, and I listened to the intro to this by, I forget the name of the critic, but he does an intro to it. And basically he starts, appearing in small roles, and he becomes, he's an action, like he starts being the action director for some movies, and he appears as the lead in some movies. So they're like traditional, period dramas. I don't know what they're called, if they're Chinese or whatever, and so then he does Half a Loaf of Kung Fu and some other stuff that he's also the lead in, and he's not yet the director of the movie, but he's like the choreography or the action director. And Half a Loaf of Kung Fu is interesting, and I'm interested in watching the other ones because I like Jackie Chan movies. I think he's one of the great stars of my life. And it's cool to see like early Jackie Chan because he's not all broken yet, just in a physical sense. Not that he's like looks really bad in later movies, but like it's just, he's young and fit and he's a hunk and all that. And he's just not interested in being a hunk. Like he knows Kung Fu maybe, but like this one, he doesn't know Kung Fu for a while. But it's also kind of boring. Like the movie is really just not a lot. Like there's it's really like, it's like what you were describing, where like they sort of say, and this guy over here, and then this thing over here, and then here I am, and I don't know Kung Fu yet, and now I'm reading this manual and I'm learning Kung Fu. And it's making, if I knew these films more, I'd probably really appreciate all the jokes that were being made about that genre. Mm-hmm. I only have a vague understanding of that genre, mostly from related, like I've watched a certain amount of Japanese period films and occasionally read things in reference to Chinese ones, but like don't know that much about that genre. So I'm like, I almost want to rewatch some of those and then come back to Half a Loaf of Kung Fu, because it was more interesting as like an early Jackie Chan film, kind of seeing him do his thing. And some of the other actors were interesting too, but like it's almost more interesting from that era side of things than it is from like the movie itself. Anyways.
Isn't it funny how sometimes they're like very conventionally handsome men? I don't know if Jackie Chan is conventionally handsome, but he's handsome.
Yeah.
Like have trouble being serious. The one that always comes to mind for me that's more modern is like Channing Tatum.
Yeah, I was actually about to say Channing Tatum.
He has that really chiseled look that I guess you just from biases associate with like Slavic Eastern European type of look, which is not like known for being humorous. But then he seems to just be a goofball in reality.
Well, and like Henry, there's a video of Henry Cavill putting a computer together. So Henry Cavill seems like he's kind of a geek, but like he's Superman. So,
and then you have like Leonardo DiCaprio or Brad Pitt, who seems so, especially Leonardo DiCaprio, seems so self-serious. It's interesting. Like, I think there's a habit of associating a certain kind of attractiveness with like seriousness, and then that it turns out people are more unique than that.
People are people, yo.
And it's just funny because then like I think Jet Li is quite attractive, and he does not do a lot of humor. Like
no.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, but Jackie Chan just seems more comfortable when he's being self-deprecating and funny and so on.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying, I think.
Yes, that is what I'm saying. And it's I'd be curious to see his early roles where he's apparently not as good and is trying to be more serious. The other two things I watched were The Comb, which is a Quay Brothers short. Quay Brothers are interesting, and I don't have anything to say because if you like the Quay Brothers, you do. If you don't, you don't. They're quirky and odd and really neat.
Dark and weird and strange.
Dark and weird. And then I watched Hocus Pocus, which I don't have a lot to say about. It's just a fun, silly Disney movie that wasn't very popular at the time and got popular later. I didn't see it.
Classic.
It's become a cult classic, I guess, as much as things do in this day and age. I watched it a few years ago and was like, oh, that's kind of cute. It's got a lot of fun and silly things in it, and Bette Midler and Sarah Jessica Parker, and I forget the name of the other woman, doing a dance on stage. And like, what's that?
Kathy Najimy, you heathen.
Kathy Najimy, you heathen, says my girlfriend. And it was actually also fun because the young girl in that, the younger sister, Thora Birch, goes on to Ghost World, which I've never seen, but I hear is good. And is also one of the girls on the buses in a later scene in The Last Black Man in San Francisco, a movie that I love and I need to rewatch. Anyways, so Hocus Pocus was cute and fun. And that's kind of it of the other movies I've watched. I'm watching the same things you are, Survival of the Dead and probably Return of the Living Dead.
And I want you to watch a K-drama at some point. You need to watch more than a few to like start to get a sense of things. There are people out there who've seen dozens and dozens and so
I'm not
on.
sure.
I don't think I'm going to get
for that.
But I definitely want to see.
I need to get to some K dramas. We're finishing. Hopefully, I'll have something to report back on for the Dark Crystal series. We're finishing that, and then there was something else I wanted. We're working I'm trying to finish Stargate Atlantis and Stargate SG-1. I started a rewatch of SG-1, and I decided to finally finish Atlantis, which is of the three Stargate stuff is like that's the only part of Stargate I haven't watched, and whatever that new show is, that the Origins one that showed up online. So I have those to watch, and those are some of the things I've watched and will be watching. And then I don't know what else I'm going to be watching. I want to watch Brazil before it leaves the Criterion channel. I don't know if I'll get to that this week.
We do have a Blu-ray copy if you need it.
Right, which I can borrow. I want to watch The Fugitive, which is I think that's the film that's kind of famous in French New Wave cinema because a lot of those guys really liked it.
Not the Harrison Ford one, the original.
The original, the one with the kid, that's from I guess, what would that be, the 60s? I don't remember now. There's that, and then there's a couple of other things leaving the Criterion channel, like the Quay Brothers shorts, and there's that 70s section of Criterion stuff. Lots of things to watch, but who knows what I'll have time for.
Sounds good.
Anyways, we should go. We have a thing to go do.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for watching, everybody. This has been fun. Have a good summer. Bye-bye.